Plan is going to be essential not only to utilize your time to best, but actually to use the right things to improve your score, right? So you need to figure out how to exactly you're going to use your time, but also how exactly you're going to do everything you need to do within that time. And on top of that, the third aspect is doing the right things that's actually going to improve your score, right? An effective learner, let's say, learns a certain amount in a certain amount of days. A mindless learner might learn the same exact amount, but it's going to take them 10 times as much because they don't apply those three essential aspects to improving their score in the shortest amount of time. This is how to be the most effective learner on the SAT. So hi, I'm Karthik. This is a study plan for the November SAT or any SAT that you're taking that's less than 2.5 weeks away. All right. So the first thing you have to do, you have less than 2.5 weeks. So the first very highest category of figuring out exactly what you need to do is the priority of sections. And this is generally easy to do. If you've taken a practice exam that was less than a week ago, or you haven't and you need to take a practice exam currently, which you should do, you ultimately use that to figure out your section scores, right? So figure out generally where you are in your section scores. And honestly, you can take a practice exam, but QASs are going to be so much better for this because they're literally the real exam, right? So figure out your section scores while scoring reading and grammar individually, right? So the reading out of 400, the grammar out of 400, which combines to get your English score, but you want to know how you score that individually. And math, you can just score all together because regardless of calculator or non-calculator, they test the same concepts. And what you want to do is give weight to each section or time, right? So imagine you score like 400, you get a perfect score, right? So that would be like exact one third, one third, one third for math concepts, grammar, and reading. But that's obviously not going to be the case. And it's obviously not going to be the case that you score evenly on all of them, right? So divide the time just generally based on where you are in the section. So let's say you have almost a near perfect grammar score, but your math score is like okay, but your reading score is very bad, right? So your math score, you can effectively increase so much quicker, rather than reading. So what I would do is focus your priority on math specifically, right? So for grammar and math sections, it's going to be easier to prioritize those for learning. Like essentially what I'm saying is it's just easier to improve in those. Reading takes a significantly longer time to improve. So your focus should be on math and grammar, especially if you're scoring under 700s in any of those sections, right? For grammar, that would be you're scoring less than 75% of the actual in like the section correct. I would focus on those entirely because those are just going to be so much more easier to improve because you'll be in a different stage than you are in reading, right? In reading, there's nothing to essentially learn. It's just all practicing and rote memorization of strategies. But if your reading is extremely poor and your math and grammar are extremely high, you don't have a choice. Don't go from math, 780 to 800. Focus on your like 500 reading, let's say, or 600 reading. That's the time where you should really focus on reading because that's your main constraint. Okay. The next thing I have to do is like, how do you actually apply the time and device? In all of my other videos, I've always said this like main thing. And the idea is you need to focus on as much time as possible and forget about doing 1 hour a day, 2 hours a day. Do as much as you possibly can, right? And a lot of the times, like I'll see comments or I'll get like an email about someone person, like how do I actually apply that? What are the things that I can do that'll actually help me get to that point, right? And here's just a very specific thing that you could do right now. And I highly recommend you do right now, right? The Google Calendar strategy, right? Basically what I want you to do is plan every little thing that you're going to do in the next 2.5 weeks, right? So school, sports, every time you have some sort of time commitment where you must go to that thing and you can't do any homework, schoolwork, anything at home, what I want you to do is plan that in a calendar, right? And plan how long it's going to take to get there and come back as well. Then you have that all in your Google Calendar to see visually. And what the idea is, you need to find all the gaps in your time. You have 2.5 weeks. So this probably takes 30 minutes to do, right? It's actually a decent amount of time commitment. But that 30 minutes that you sacrifice doing this is going to boost your improvement so much more than if you don't figure out the explicit times, right? Because you need to have a quantitative way to see how much time you actually have to improve and divide that remaining time using the section priority that I just talked about, right? So grammar, reading, math, just divide it between there, right? And use all of that time. Don't leave any time to waste. 2.5 weeks is not that much time unless you use the strategy and squeeze every bit of it that you can, right? I talk about this a lot, but the time to prepare for the SAT is like this, and the duration of the effect that the SAT is going to have is like this. So utilize all of this so you can affect all of this in the best way possible, right? So just think about that frame of reference every time you think that you shouldn't be like going all out in the last 2.5 weeks. You should be because of this and this, right? Don't be afraid to schedule this for the December SAT. That's going to be about like 6 weeks away, right? 5.5 weeks. It's the people that prepare the most in advance that are going to get the highest success because they have more time to do the things than other people who have less time because they have spent too much time not having a plan, right? A plan is essential to increasing your score here. Prioritize within sections, right? It's important that overall section priority, like 4 times specifically, matters, right? So I talked about how you prioritize within the whole test, but within every section, there's idea of where you are in every skill, right? So every type of question actually falls under a certain category of skill, right? So for grammar and math, you're either in the learning phase or the practice phase for certain questions, where learning is generally you just don't know it and you need to figure it out. And practice is just you know the concept, but the example is just difficult and you need to practice using the thing that you learned previously in the learning phase and actually get good at it, right? And you're going to split each skill by the types of questions. But for reading specifically, there is no learning phase, right? That's why it's harder to improve on. As I talked about before, you have to just put in volume, right? Treat every question type as a different type of concept, right? So the skills that you have in grammar and math are just like question types in reading, right? Build strategies and apply those for types you often get wrong, right? So if I get evidence pairs wrong, often I just build a type of concept, or I build a type of strategy that helps me get that right. I try the strategy and I make sure that it works, right? You need more detail to actually figure out what to do for every specific one of the steps. I just gave a general idea of what the phases are, but I have other videos for reading, math, and grammar specifically on my channel that talk about strategy for that specific section. So how you improve, what you do, what to prioritize. I highly, highly recommend watching at least one of those videos for your section, the section that you struggle with the most, right? Let's say you struggle with reading the most, watch that video on reading, right? My reading strategy and how I actually improved in reading. It talks about the specific things that I did and what I actually prioritized in order to get good at that. So this is just telling you what the prioritization is, but how to actually improve in that prioritization I've covered in depth, and there's no way I can cover that in this video. So I highly recommend again to reference those. Okay, what you actually should be doing is practicing and testing, right? The only like concepts you ever need to do. And what I mean by practicing, I'm not talking about the practice stage, but I'm just talking about the like reviewing and then learning and practicing, like doing anything that involves you to be in the learning stage, the practice stage, just reviewing your like incorrect answers. And then obviously testing, like the time you actually spend taking the test and doing the work, right? You should be testing concepts a minimum of twice a week. So you should be testing it in some sort, like Khan Academy, questions online, QAS's, practice tests. You should be testing a minimum twice a week, right? At least for like an hour or two. Like honestly, I wouldn't think it's crazy to be taking an exam twice a week, right? Just to figure out exactly where you are. That's about 5 exams until a real test, probably 4 because you don't want to be taking exam right before your actual exam, but you have less than a month till your final exam. So it's not unreasonable for you to be testing that much because you need to see if you're actually absorbing learning. And also, it's okay to test with Khan Academy, right? Use their section tests, their section quizzes to see if you actually know the specific skill, right? So use the little 4 questions just to test, do you know that specific skill? Because like 8 questions, right? So if you do the Khan Academy thing twice, is essentially how many times that one question type a maximum is going to show up in the SAT. So doing all 8 of them on Khan Academy is a way of testing. So test multiple skills to actually make sure that you retain them and you know them. Test old skills that you haven't tested in a while to still make sure you know them, right? And just note, testing doesn't directly make you better. It just analyzes where you currently are, right? So what you need to do is prepare in order to solve those specific problems. So your practice, right, and everything I talked about before is going to actually help you improve, right? 60% is your practice, right? And 60% is just a loose number. Some people might even do even more or, you know, a little less, but it's always above how much you test because practicing is actually where the learning happens. So if there's anything you get away from this side, practice more than you test. Okay, start now. If you haven't done the calendar strategy right now and you've blocked out all your time, do it right now. Prove to yourself that you're going to take action and perform the things that's necessary to get a good score. If you don't do that, you're honestly not going to take the steps that you need to, right? Makes this video actually work. Don't waste the 10 minutes that you spent watching this video. Actually make it work. Actually do something so you can then look back at yourself 2.5 weeks from now and be grateful that you actually put some effort in. If you guys are interested on one-on-one SAT prep, click the link in the description. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you learned something today.